Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over Part 3, Chapter 6, the final chapter of George Orwell's classic, 1984. Is Winston going to be the same person that he was before? Are they going to let him back into society? Are they just going to kill him off? Join me as we dissect the final chapter of this haunting but important series in this book. Let's dive in, shall we? This chapter starts out with Winston sitting at the Chestnut Tree Cafe drinking gin and listening to music from the telescreen. As he's sitting there, he sees a poster of Big Brother, and it states, "Big Brother is watching you." He goes on to tell the reader about how ever since they let him out, he has started to become growing fatter and fatter, and that his usual routine never varied. He always had the corner booth at the Chestnut Tree Cafe, the waiter always refilled his cup of gin, and they always brought over the chessboard with a copy of the Times on it. As he tells the reader all of this, he also says there is an announcement from the telescreen, which he thinks is going to be about the war and what's currently going on. The war between Oceania and Eurasia. But that is not the message. Instead, it's a bulletin how the 3-year plan for bootlaces had been overfilled by 98%. After this, he goes on to examine the chessboard and tells the reader that the white always mates, and that the white always wins. And he wonders if that symbolized the eternal, unvarying triumph of good over evil. After the announcement about the bootlaces is over, the voice says in a much harsher tone and severe tone that there is an important announcement to be made at 15:30, and no one should miss it. After this, the music begins to play. Winston thought that perhaps they're going to mention something about the war and how they're making progress. Winston goes on and talks about the war and how he has an idea of how Oceania might be able to win against Africa and take dominion of the country. After this, he settled himself down into a series of studies of the chess board, and almost unconsciously he traces with his fingers in the dust of the table 2 + 2 is 5. He remembers when Julia had stated that they can't get inside of you, but they could get inside of you. He remembers O'Brien stating what happens to you here is forever. He then tells the reader about how he saw Julia. He even spoke to her. He tells the reader that he was in no danger and he knew it. It's as though instinctively that now they almost took no interest in his doings whatsoever. They could have actually met a second time if either of them had wanted to do it. He goes on to talk about the memory and how in early March it was very cold and the earth was like iron and the grass seemed dead. They passed each other without a sign, and at first he didn't realize it was her. He turns around and follows her, but she does not speak or look at him. As they are walking away across the grass, he puts his arms around her waist. He knew that there was no telescreen around, but couldn't be sure about microphones. He also states that they could have been seen no matter what, and it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. They could have laid down on the floor and have done it if they'd wanted to. She made no response whatever to his arms being around her waist. She didn't even try to disengage herself. They end up sitting next to each other on 2 iron chairs. The first thing she states is that she's betrayed Winston, and he says, "I betrayed you." She goes on to state that sometimes they threaten you with something you can't stand up to, can't even think about, and then you say, "Don't do it to me, do it to somebody else. Do it to so-and-so." And perhaps you might pretend afterwards that it was only a trick and that you said it just to make them stop, and that you really didn't mean it. But that it wasn't true. At that time when you said it, you did mean it. You think there is no way of saving yourself, and you're quite ready to save yourself in any way possible. She said that you don't care about anybody else. All you care about is yourself. Winston agrees and echoes her symptoms. She states that after that, you don't feel the same towards the other person any longer. Winston states, "No, you don't feel the same." After this, Julia gets up and says that she needs to catch her tube so she can go home. Winston tells her that we must meet again, and she says yes, that they must. He follows her for a little bit and thinks that he's going to follow her to the station, but as he's doing this, he realizes it's no use, and he turns back around and heads towards the Chestnut Tree Cafe. As he's in there in his booth, he thinks of the conversation they just had, and he agrees with what she says. He notices something changing in the music, and he's not sure if it's a memory or if it's actually happening at this point, but a voice was singing, "Under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me." Winston then tells the reader about his life and what a sad existence it really is now. He mentions that if it weren't for the gin, he wouldn't be able to get up in the morning and to do his job. He tells the reader that his job now in the Ministry of Truth was a subcommittee of a subcommittee discussing newspeak in a new edition of the dictionary and figuring out small minor details and if they were important or not. Before he's able to finish the story, a trumpet blast can be heard from the telescreen, just as Winston had predicted and strategized in his head. The confirmation of the telescreen tells everyone that they have won the battle against Eurasia. Everyone can be heard shouting and screaming with victory and joy, and even Winston feels fantastic about this news. He does not run or jump with everybody else, but still has the same excitement. As the voice continues to keep talking, everybody goes back to doing their job, and Winston sits there with a blissful dream, paying no mind to his glass that has been filled with gin again. In his mind, he was back at the Ministry of Love, with everything for him. His soul was white as snow. He thought about walking down the white-tiled corridors with the feeling of walking in the sunlight, as an armed guard is following behind him, and he longs and hopes for the bullet to enter his brain. He gazes up at the enormous face of Big Brother. For 40 years, this poster had taken him, and he wanted to learn what kind of smile was hidden beneath a dark mustache. As he looked up to the poster, 2 tears trickled down from his eyes onto the side of his nose. He had finally won the victory over himself. He now loved Big Brother. This is where 1984 ends. Thank you so much for joining us today, as this is the last episode of 1984. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay tuned for the next series that's coming up, and as always, stay lit.